Shall we get started?
Sure, we're live on YouTube.
Okay. So welcome everyone to the 14th Core Dev Call meeting. The agenda today is pretty light. We'll go over the Swarm updates. Then we have the status components discussion, and then an area for miscellaneous and announcements. So who wants to go first with the, I guess we should first get someone to take notes, if that's possible.
Take notes.
Thanks, Rachel. So who wants to go first with the Swarm updates?
I can go first, if no one wants to. Maybe I will start with sticker market. So essentially, we didn't do a lot like recently because we are mostly done. Andre did some changes around handling contract interaction. So the idea was to reduce the transaction being performed once you try to buy a sticker pack. And then on the contract audit front, well, we are still in the process of auditing the contract, but that's essentially the last bit we need to do. So that's pretty much it for sticker market. I can continue with the browser Swarm, actually.
Yep, go ahead.
So Andre implemented EIP 7.12, and the goal of this EIP is to provide like a different way to sign data from within your DApp. So like, because the previous way to signing data was purely string based, but now you can sign like more complex structured information. So which is actually something that was requested by a number of external DApp developers. Also he's starting like working on separating dApps in a separate tab. So because right now, as you know, we have both chats and dApps in the same tab, which is well, I guess one like feedback we had a lot that it was a little bit confusing. So now there's a new design to separate this in two different tabs, and well, Andre already started and is making great progress on that. And the last bit we are working on is creating a new swarm around extension. And the idea is to push and finally have extension like out of alpha. So we will create a swarm around that just to make sure that we all agree on the scope and there is a little bit more ownership on that front. That's it.
That's great. Thanks, Julien. Who's next?
I can do it. Am I muted? Hello?
No, can hear you.
Okay. For the tribute to talk, well, the chat swarm in general, last week we fixed the toolbars. So there is a pending PR, and the next step will be to make it a component. And regarding tribute to talk, we are in the final touch of implementing the chat UI for tribute to talk. The settings are done, but there is a few things that we need to still figure out, like if we keep the personalized message or not for now, and versioning of the tribute to talk contract. But we should do most of the progress this week. We have a call with Ricardo and Richard this week. So that's it.
Cool. Thanks, Eric. Anyone up next?
I can go on the dApp store stuff. So in tandem with the work that Julien and Andre have been doing on the various different browser changes and everything that he just detailed now, we're also slowly moving ahead with implementing Matthias's designs for version 1 of the dApp store. There's some folks in Cape Town who are going to help us do that. the initial thinking was that we would sort of manage it all through bounties, but it's a fairly large project, and it seems better to try and experiment with rather sort of contracting a particular organization to do the full load of work, and we'll pay in cryptocurrency and all that kind of stuff, which is really cool. So we should have version 1 of the store, which will just be like the suggested home screen icon for our new browser tab. That should be done hopefully in the next 2 weeks. And in the meantime, we'll be finalizing the contract and hopefully preparing it for audits so that we can, as soon as, the navigation PR has been merged and we've got those 4 separate tabs at the bottom of the app, we can have the dApp store up and running and get SNT ranking into it, hopefully, in the next month or 2, depending on how the contract audits go. But that stuff is moving along nicely.
Great. Thanks, Andy.
So I can go next.
Yep.
So for the tele network, we're finishing and adding the escrow workflow, a lot of other UI details here and there just to really tidy up the application. We created this data seeding system. So when we deploy the dApp in the contracts, it can do a bunch of actions automatically, which makes it much easier to see the dApp in action and test things more easily. And we're going to be deploying the dApp soon, again, a new version to Rinkeby. For the DAO, basically, we're analyzing now the next steps that we're going to take towards the DAO. And I'll have more news on that next time. And Embark, we're how would you say this? We're kind of like in turbo mode. We're just like fixing any bugs we can find. We're going to release a beta this week with the idea of releasing next week the final 4 version. And also we're working on a new website, which should be released next week as well.
Oh, lots of things going on. Great. Thanks, Yuri. Anyone up next?
I can go. I'm working on topic democracy. Now I'm currently researching how I will implement the veto function. And also there is a problem with the allocation of SNT. Not a problem, but a characteristic that is, there is some balances that need to be removed from the total quorum because they are like not active balances, they are locked balances. So there is these 2 things that I'm working on topic democracy. And also I am researching on Ethereum J to see if we can, I already started some porting to Whisper version 6 from the version 3 that is on Ethereum J to the 6. And with that, I think it should be easy to build something for status in Ethereum J if someone wants to.
Great. Thanks, Ricardo. Anyone else?
Because Igor is on vacation, I can tell about status quo, at least the part.
Yes.
So we have released the hotfix last week. Mainly it was about possibility to cancel the pinned mail server. So when you selected some mail server as your preferred one, you was not able to unselect it. Now you can. So if for some reason mail server is not responding or whatever, behaving in a wrong way, now you can just cancel and have the app to select any other mail server that is responding and behaving well. And we also added some changes to the bottom navigation in the mobile app. So the tabs are now visible, the home and wallet and profile tabs should be visible when you navigate actually in any screen. As I know, Pedro, you've done a lot of, let's say, changes to our build system, so maybe you can also update a bit about it.
Mm-hmm. So basically, we're moving from our ad hoc setup where we download all the dependencies we need into the Nix package manager system. So this has been going on for, I believe, 3 or 4 weeks now. We're in the final stages before merging this to develop. We'll start testing soon. And the last remaining target is Linux, which is giving us problems because we can compile it fine on Ubuntu 18, but it doesn't run on Ubuntu 16. So we're fixing that, and should be ready end of this week. So I invite everyone to give it a try and see if they find any kinks, or if, on the contrary, everything is working as expected. It shouldn't have any impact on the existing environment you have, so don't be afraid to give it a test. I already had some feedback from external developers who reached out to me and said they weren't able, for instance, to build Androids. And after trying this branch, they got it up and running in a few minutes. So that was good to see. Yeah, that's what I have for Nix.
Can I ask you, do you still like Nix?
Yeah, more and more.
That's the best sign.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the same return from Jakub. He's been also playing with it, and he's also been enjoying it more and more. So that's a good sign. That's for sure. It's been allowing us to do whatever we've needed, and gracefully. So that's a sign of a mature environment, when you can do stuff like this gracefully.
I've got a few things from a security perspective. This week we'll be starting a retainer with Trail of Bits. They're going to be kind of watching over PRs we do, watching our contracts. We're going to be piloting their new product called Critic that basically automatically integrates with GitHub and runs all their tool sets on smart contract pull requests, and then notifies according to whatever issues there may be. That should help with the beginning stages of all the audits that are currently being done on all the swarms. And if we need another third-party audit, a full audit, then we'll move forward with that after the initial overview from them. Also, today we're launching our private campaign with HackerOne, so we can start potentially seeing bugs come in, hopefully not too fast, on any, and the scope of these is any of the current public releases of the application and the infrastructure that serves that application, so the website basically. And we'll see bugs come in from there, from whatever hackers they invite in the private campaign. That will slowly increase, so we're trying to keep a cadence of around 5 valid bug reports per month. And then I'll be handling those and dishing them out to whoever needs to mitigate whatever comes there. So expect to hear that, hopefully not too much, but regularly over the next few months, coming from HackerOne.
Great. Thanks, Corey. Does anyone else have an update they want to give?
I can give a quick update about Keycard. So we are almost feature complete for an alpha version of the Keycard integration with the status for Android. The only thing that we still miss is the transaction signing, and this should be ready in about a week, roughly. We're also working on improving the login speed with Keycard, and also we are working on the development of a Keycard app for the Ledger Nano X, which is the Bluetooth version of the Nano that's coming on the market in the coming weeks. And currently we're implementing a secure channel here. And maybe about wallets, I think Goran is not here, but there's no ongoing work since Goran is working on the keycard to help to get to this alpha stage quickly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sounds great. So unless there's more updates, we can move to the discussion of status components. Does anyone else have updates? Okay, so let's move on. Julien, do you want to kick it off, or I think this was yours? Or Eric, I'm not sure.
Wasn't mine.
Okay.
Sorry, I was unmuted somehow. Yeah, I wanted to restart this discussion around components, mostly because, well, now we have a number of different dApps that we are working on in parallel. Looks like most of them are kind of re-implementing their own components, at least the basic ones. Because, yeah, well, this whole discussion around component is quite old, and lots of people have been involved in it, and lots of different point of views. So the one I want to initiate right now is very focused, and yeah, so that's why I want to provide some context around what I'm thinking about. But essentially, yeah, I feel like most of the very basic component we have, so things like button, list item, and so on, they are kind of duplicated in, like, at least once in status React, in React Native, and then essentially probably like a couple of times in the various dApps we have, like Tailor Network, or ENS name, or eventually the dApp Store one that we will start working on pretty soon. So it sounds like an opportunity to work on this and try to do something a little bit like more interesting for status as an organization. So I guess my idea would be to have like just an extra repository that would contain only those components. So it could be somewhat like extracted from what we have right now. Like in status React, we have some components, so they don't really exactly match the Figma ones, but still it's something. But yeah, I guess we should use the Figma list as a source of truth of components. So if we have like a separate repository with just component for both React, so web, and React Native, so mobile, what we have currently in status React. So I think it would be like much easier for everybody to synchronize and interact and just make sure we are all on the same page. And if we do that, maybe it would make sense to have those components implemented in JavaScript actually, and not Clojure. So this way there would be a single code base of all components in the same language. And because JavaScript is kind of a very common language right now, where it would probably be easy to have external contributors create those components.
Yeah.
And also, if we remove the whole complexity behind status React, so, well, thanks to your hard work, Pedro, it will be very easy now to compile status React. But still, if we remove all of this complexity, it looks like it would be a win for all of us. So yeah, that's kind of the high-level idea I wanted to discuss. Get like feedback and ideas from people working on dApps like Tailor Network, or feedback from design team, just to see if that makes sense. And yeah, again, I'm trying to have a very narrow and fixed scope so that actually we can deliver and ship something this time. And then once we have this basic stuff, we can always add other things or think about more, I don't know, more component, or having something like more Web3 oriented. But at least I think it makes sense to start with the very basic components that we already use. So like button, list items, and badges, all those things. And once we have that, I think it will be a strong foundation to simplify and improve like synergy across teams. So yeah, I mean, that's the whole idea, to initiate a discussion and get some feedback from other people.
Sorry, just be clear, you mean React components?
Yeah. Well, I mean like visual components. So because we are mostly using React, that would be a React component and React Native.
Right. We have like a boatload of them now in Embark because of Cockpit. And I mean, Striders as well. We have now for Taller too, for the DAO. So yeah, it would be nice to standardize all of that, and it would save potentially a lot of work when creating new applications.
Can I comment from the design perspective on this?
Sure.
It's like Julien said, it's a pretty old discussion, and speaking on behalf of the design team, we would be happy to turn those thoughts and discussions into action. So I'm definitely on board with Julien with narrowing the scope and creating something simple but usable. On the design side of things, so as you all know, we have a component library for the app, but there's no defined components for web-based apps such as dApps. Although when designing dApps, we do follow certain patterns and we do reuse certain things, but there's no centralized sort of library that would be a collection of all those reusable elements. So, but like I said, it's not just out of nowhere. We do have like similarities and a certain level of reusability in dApps. So to kick things off quickly, I would suggest starting with basic things such as typography, color palette, and icons, which are completely the same on all platforms. And the native app, I mean, and the web-based apps such as dApps. So if there's any need for assistance, I will be happy to help. And if we move further and start creating components for web, I would suggest creating, for example, one component and define that in Figma in detail, have all the specifications. I would vote for a list item because it's the most common, I guess, or maybe buttons, or maybe text input, something to start with and explore all the problems that we potentially face. Yeah, that's it for me. What do you think?
I think that interesting that you mentioned about the difference about the native app and the apps. Right now we have this difference, but just to mention this, I think that in future everything is going to be the same. Everything would be at the app. So like the chat screen and the wallet and the profile. Right now we have this native part built like a hard-coded, but in future, from my vision, I see that this would be abstracted out in the apps. So it's easier to update, easier to maintain, and so
on. So that's on the code level, right? But on the UX level, there would be some differences because of the difference in basically in user experience between web-based applications and native. The most simple example would be the tab bar. So websites, they don't have anything that is sticking to the bottom in a mobile website, for example, because it works inside of a browser window, and that gives us certain limitations. And most commonly, a web-based app would be scrollable down. It wouldn't have a tab bar that sticks to the bottom, and that creates certain differences. there are more differences considering the native, considering the platform, with text input, with displaying errors in text inputs. So there's a different level of control, as far as I know, when we're talking about websites versus native apps. I'm not saying that they should be different, but I guess for now, it's just providing a better experience. They most likely would be different.
Just to echo some of what you're saying, Andre, I think list item would be a really good place to start, from like the component side next to colors and fonts. And then as to what you were just talking about when it comes to, sorry, I got distracted for a second.
With the list item, it's a really nice example, because this is an example when it's the same on both web and native. It's going to be completely the same. And yeah, we'll start with, and also the reusable fundamentals such as typography, color palette, and icons, which are also going to be the same.
No, so totally. I'm totally on board. I think that those are a really good place to start, and to kind of stay away from the. So I totally understand the concern about having components that might be different on web as they are on native. I think we need to discuss those case by case, because it feels like otherwise we get into an endless. Like, should we or shouldn't we copy or like implement components for both native and web at the same time always? I think it's really difficult to have that, to set that rule, but to discuss it case by case would be more productive.
Yeah, agreed.
Does anybody have feedback to the idea of implementing the components in JavaScript?
For me, also, just to add something from the design perspective, I'm all for implementing them in JavaScript, because designers also are familiar with JavaScript because it's such a popular language these days. So it's going to also attract more contributors. I mean, design contributors. So yeah, I guess.
But to me, it seems like doing the animations in a library in JavaScript is going to be a bit, I don't know, maybe not. I don't know.
I think we should research the most common and modern patterns they use these days. If we're going to use React, I'm sure there's plenty of good animation libraries there. Let's just research some best practices before kicking this off.
I have a question. I mean, we're asking people to build their dApps compatible with status. So how do we ensure that they can visually and design-wise express what they want with their design, so that we don't become too overwhelming?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a nice comment, by the way. And it brings us back to this really long discussion about what are we building and what is the target audience of what we're trying to build. So if we're creating a component library that we are going to use inside status to build our own dApps, it's one thing. But if we are building a component library for third-party developers, it's another thing. And if that's true, we should definitely consider some customizable elements, customizable color palettes, all that sort of stuff. And I would suggest starting with building component library that we would use for dApps that we build internally, so to say.
Yeah, I completely agree with it. Sorry. Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the reasons why, like, the original discussion never ended and never concluded to something like done, is that we were trying to solve all the problems of the world now in one library. So personally, just like very pragmatically, what I need is just component that I will use as a developer. And I'd rather focus on that first and make sure we implement it and ship it. Yeah, especially given that I'm not sure external developers that are really interested in reusing whatever component we provide. They probably are very fine using something else, and actually it would be kind of complex for them, I guess, if they want to run in other non-status browser. So yeah, I don't know. My perspective would be just doing something simple and actually implementing it. And back to the previous point about dApps and web dApps, I think we have kind of two different usage of web technology in status. And for instance, something like the dApp store, well, it's almost not a dApp in the sense that it will run directly within status. It will not run as a regular dApp in the browser. So you don't have the whole browser decoration and components and UI elements. And probably it also kind of change the way those components they will behave. So to me, it's almost like, in this case, the dApp store one, it's almost like native in the sense that you shouldn't be able to, as a user, to distinguish that it's web, or it would be a little bit weird. So in this case,
sorry.
Yeah, sorry, just to finish. In this case, I feel like there should be some common components that we can share, like between web and native.
Regarding the dApp store being basically native, I would suggest not to pretend that it's a native app when it's a web app, and to be more transparent and honest about it, and to be ready for it to be used outside of status. So yes, it's most likely going to be used inside status in a sort of controlled environment of ours. But since it is a dApp and it has a URL and it is accessible from at someday, some other app would decide to use status dApp store as their dApp store, for example. I suggest we should be ready for that and just think about it as a regular website, as a regular dApp, not considering what we have in our environment and the status app, if that makes sense.
Actually, I think that isn't that what we are doing? I thought that we were going to present it as a website. It's going to be like a suggested home screen in the browser rather than a native line or functionality. Partially,
it is. Technically, it is. It's. I guess what Julien was saying, that how do we think about it? How do, like, more of a methodology sort of kind of discussion, if I understand correctly.
Well, that sounds very smart, so I would say yes. No, actually, I'm not really sure. Actually, I didn't realize it would be shown as a real web app.
Yeah, because part of the, well, anyway, that's off topic, but part of the idea is that we're not actually offering a list of dApps, and thereby we're not violating any app store rules by offering digital goods for sale. So it's actually intentionally separating the dApp store, but this is just this particular example. In other cases, we might be actually emulating a more native feeling with a dApp.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, Julien, I think that's a much better example would be the ENS names the app. That's probably, like, in my mind, a better example of something that could potentially feel more native because it plugs into all the identity work and stuff that Andre has been doing. Whereas the dApp store is specifically external and will have, eventually, if I get my way, like a whole bunch of features, like upvoting and downvoting with SNT and interactions with your wallets and stuff, which will make it fairly complete and complex and worthy of its own URL and standing alone, in addition to all the App Store guidelines that Rachel just mentioned.
Yeah, true.
Right, good point.
Might be worth formalizing this whole component discussion in a swarm write-up, because we've identified some research needs, and in terms of implementation, it sounds like there might be different phases here, and there's a lot to consider in terms of like how we actually handle the implementation. It would be really attractive if we could manage to bounty out the whole thing, and it seems like something that we should be able to find enough external contributors who would be interested and capable of doing, especially if we're creating components in JavaScript. I could take a stab at writing up at least like an intro and a few sections for this as a swarm. I don't know how many people would have time to dedicate, but it's certainly like a shared interest. So does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah, Rachel, if we could formalize it. So I'm also like a big fan of doing it in JavaScript. I'm sorry that I sort of pushed perhaps in the wrong direction last time, and I'm more than willing to go along, particularly with our designers' preferences on this. And, you know, if we do it in JavaScript, we could potentially reuse like a little bit of the work that we did on our storybook last time if we find any of it to be useful. And certainly like the same guys who are keen on doing the dApp store work for us have been asking if there's like any other work in between version 1 of the dApp store and like implementing the smart contract stuff. So they would be keen perhaps to take on something like that, because they have React experience, if we decide that doing it in JavaScript is okay, given the animations and like input from everybody else.
Caveats. Okay, cool. Yeah, then I'll take a stab at doing a write-up so that we can bring that up to other people.
A note also, because there is some more time to discuss. I think a write-up is a great idea, as it's a bit of a larger effort altogether. Just coming back to things like font and color palette and list item, are any of those being implemented for React Native now that could be expanded? So we have like a start.
Right, definitely. Actually, list item is probably one of those components that really are very close to what has been designed. And things like color, typography, yeah, I think we have pretty much it. So it sounds like a great set of components to start with.
So is anyone working on those specifically that has, time to expand on the work they've already done for React Native?
So those have been implemented like a long time ago. I think I am the one who created the list item, so I can definitely work on that.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, that would be awesome. Just I wouldn't want to. These seem like things that we would need regardless of whatever like future system we come up with. So it feels like the sooner we can start on those, the better. So if you say you're working on list item, is anyone working on fonts at the moment, or is that also something that's already happened in the past?
Yeah, I guess it's part of those components that already existed before the Figma design, so they are pretty much done.
Okay.
By the way, regarding the typography, the typeface we use, as you all know, it's open source and it's being actively developed, and it's being updated once in a while. So just to consider this, we never discussed that before, that this typeface needs updating. So if anybody could, let's create like a, I don't know, sort of a roadmap, or let's just keep that in mind, that it's updated. So somebody would go to the developer's website, download the latest typeface and update it inside the code base. I'm talking about inter-UI typeface right now. The one we use on both native app and dApps.
Okay, so I guess we have a plan, unless someone wants to discuss something else.
Yeah, maybe about the font, Andre, we can put it on the core backlog, so we can, see when someone can update that.
Yeah, okay. Just so everybody knows that it's not like a static thing, it's changing, so.
Cool.
Okay. Does anyone else have any input for this discussion, or are we done?
So maybe just like one last thought from me is I see this as kind of a collective effort, like any team doing something related to UI, which should be probably all of us. Well, at least developers, they should think component and try to just extract whatever behavior or thing they are working on to make sure that they can be reused across the various teams, and try to reduce duplication and that type of thing. So that would be really great.
Yeah.
Just maybe the designers, they can mention to the developer, look, this component here is probably being reused, and then also the designers, they can follow up this storybook or whatever is the model we are using to see if the component is actually implemented as the designer expected. So maybe it would be, as you mentioned, it is a team effort, but I guess that the design team should be in charge of taking care of what goes to this package and to actually review if it's correct.
Yeah, that sounds great. Would be happy to to do it. Let's just find out what is the best way to make it work. As I said, if we start with something really simple, it would be easy to find out what is the best way to review components, to define components. And I guess after we start with something simple, it's going to be easier to scale that system up.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds like a plan. If we're done with since we know the next steps, looks like we're done with this discussion. Should we move on to miscellaneous announcements? Does anyone have anything they want to broadcast?
Yes, I do have two small announcements, if I can start.
Sure.
First one, actually, it relates to anyone who has mobile application installed. If you haven't upgraded from 33 release, that is like 2 releases in the past, please do upgrade to the latest release. The reason is that next Monday, so in a week, we will make changes to the nightly build first and later to the next release. And you will not be able to receive messages from these two newer versions in one-to-one and in the group chats. So if you want to receive messages, please upgrade to the latest released, or if you're adventurous, to the nightly. But I would, as a tester, I would recommend to update to the latest released mobile version. For the desktop, we will announce the stable version later this week. So it was first announcement. In short, just upgrade to the latest released version. That's it. The second one is a bit more complex. So if you ever reported issues in status React repo, and you still think that your issue is relevant, but there were no actions on this like last 3 months, then it will be auto-closed by bot. It will be marked first of all with a stale label, and then it will be closed later. So if you think that issue is still relevant, please make a note like I can still reproduce, or this feature is still needed and you haven't added it to the app, but I really would like to see it. So just add some comment to the issue so it's open. It's not closed by the bot. If you, for example, got some update, but like notification from GitHub, but missed it, and you still remember about such issues, please go to status React repo and just search for issues and reopen them. That's will be very helpful and will save a lot of time for test team who will review such issues that were closed and see if they're still relevant. That's it.
Thanks, Anna. Does anyone else have an update or announcements?
I could do a quick one. So for Nimbus, I don't know if you guys are following any of that stuff, but what's happening in the Ethereum 2 world right now is that we're going to be launching a client-specific testnet of sorts for the beacon chain. Now, the beacon chain doesn't do a lot of things, but it does provide randomness and security to Ethereum 2. And part of the testnet is basically that we're going to run a whole bunch of nodes and they're going to be generating a blockchain. And the idea is that anybody can connect to this testnet and try out like Nimbus and see if it works. So if anybody is interested in becoming, like playing a validator, basically playing a stakeholder in ETH2, you can get in touch with me because this is what we'll be launching like in the next few weeks. So the workflow is basically that in Ethereum 2, you stake some ETH and then you become a validator. And then validators have these duties, which are similar to what miners do today, minus the hardware. And basically we're looking for test bunnies that want to play validators on our own testnet. So this is going to be like a first pre-alpha launch of the Nimbus testnet. And then the next thing that's going to happen is that once all the client teams have their testnets up, we'll be creating a common testnet. So yeah, get in touch if you want to try this stuff out.
Thanks, Jacek. Anyone else? Okay, looks like we're done. Thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, have a great week. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, Pedro.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Good week, guys.
You too.
Take care.